Hello, this is Daniel Prey recording from Module 4, AEP 859. Today we're going to be looking at several different topics. We're going to start with global trends and how they affect our classrooms, what we should be doing as educators. I found this chapter very interesting. I lean towards the education piece that Jacobs talks about, and the science and technology that she talks about. Some of the other ones were very good and very eye-opening, but the education piece was very interesting to me, especially when she talked about what other schools are doing and how in Seattle we're teaching half of the day in Spanish or half of the day in Chinese, and then English on the other half. So what would that look like for my own classroom, knowing that our main language is English and really no other secondary language as of now? At our southern school, we had a handful of families that their second language was, or first language was, English. Their first language was Spanish, and so could that be incorporated into the program? So it just gets me thinking about what can I do in my classroom better. But things that we can look at are, number one, education, interconnecting the world, from Jacobs, talking about the foreign language, which I spoke a little bit about, but just giving our students the ability to not only just take a class, but get involved in the curriculum, get involved in what's outside of our four walls. One thing I really like about Common Core, jumping forward just a second, is the books and the literature that it is brought into our classroom is all throughout the world. And I got to talk about this at parent-teacher conferences just the other night. We're reading books on Chad. We're reading books on Afghanistan. We're reading books on Iraq. We just read one on Southern America or South America. Just bringing those pieces in of you are not the only one, and then connecting it back to social studies, which again we'll talk about later. So getting that foreign language piece in, being able to connect with students that are around us, and making sure that we're staying up with other cultures that are surpassing us in specifically math and technology, math and science. And then jumping to another global trend of science and technology, are we able to use these two things, as Jacobs talked about with the collaboration piece, of some of the different ones that I put down and that I have been doing in my class is Skype and virtual reality. In fact, I just wrote a grant for the virtual reality piece, so I'm super excited to bring that in for my social studies piece to go anywhere I want to go. Can we go check out what a school looks like in Chad? I'm not for sure yet, but just making that. But I know 100% that we can go look at a museum in Europe, all over the world, and not just be limited to America. So super excited about that. Skype-wise, we Skype with our Southern District School, but what can we take that a step further? Can we use that piece of going over to China, or maybe even somewhere in a similar time zone? Can we go to South America and or Central America and use our Spanish to talk with? So just some good thoughts and good ideas, and made me really question what we're doing and what we need to be doing. But I thought the Common Core, which leads us into our next one, is doing a good job of the curriculum that we have based out of Engage New York Reading, ELA, on top of Engage New York. We're kind of going to Eureka Math now instead of saying Engage New York. So we jump into the next topic of Common Core, and what are some positives, what are some negatives. After researching and looking at this for several days now, I came up with a couple that we talked about that you suggested, and a couple that I have on my own. So number one, as far as the positives, we're getting our kids college and career ready. We got the article from Long in 2013. The things that we are doing now are looking to get these kids ready for college. And I guess we would find some articles that say it's not preparing them for college, but it's getting us vertically aligned to get, okay, this builds on top of this, and this builds on top of this, and this builds on top of this, which is very nice. And then going back and talking about what can we be doing better, based off some scores and assessments. Promotes cross-curricular learning from Walker 2013, which I saw in my curriculum, and I can speak specifically on, because after we got done with modules of learning about Chad and learning about Afghanistan and Iraq, then we got out our maps. So now we're into a social studies lesson, which for fourth grade, we just did this in our social studies lesson. So now we're taking the regions and we're putting it into world application. So we're finding the map keys and we're finding the equator and what book we just read and where that's located, where is that relation to us. So I definitely see the promoting of cross-curricular learning. And the last one I put was known expectations, just talking based off of my conversation with my curriculum director. There are known expectations. I know as a fourth grader in math, in the first part of the year, we're going to be working on this. In the next module, we're going to be working on this, and so on and so forth. So the standards are there. So you know the expectation, you know what you have to bring into these kids' lives and what you have to expose them to. 3 of the negatives that I found, I looked through several of them, and the ones that I picked up on are, number 1, it resembles a failed No Child Left Behind program. For those of you that have taught, as long as I have, or even longer, we saw from the article that No Child Left Behind was very tough to swallow. And as I'm looking at these scores, my district was fortunate enough that we always were above AYP, but not everybody was. And the tougher schools, maybe from inner city schools of Kansas City, were getting funds taken away from them. So what is Common Core? It's kind of that same idea of we're going to go, we're going to push, but they don't have the numbers attached to it. As far as you have to meet AYP, this many kids have to be reading. The need, I worded this one a little bit different, but the need for common standards to be able to compare our students' performances to that of students in other states. So that was that truth in America, truth versus myth. And I thought this was an interesting one. We are pushing these standards through so we can compare to another state. And I thought, what if our expectations should be higher? And that kind of goes into the next one. State has higher standards. Kansas specifically has higher standards. And in fact, in a future article, I'll talk about Common Core standards will soon be a thing of the past in Kansas. And that was back in 2017. They came out and talked about this. And we've kept those Common Core standards, brought them in, but then we also have our Kansas standards too, which is all, wouldn't say new to me, but I did not think about taking the Common Core standards back to our Kansas standards. So that was an epiphany that I had through this module. So what's my stance on Common Core? I definitely see the positives and the negatives. I taught before Common Core, and I have taught after Common Core. And it's also specific to where your district is too. We have always tried to align with standards, so we've always been going back to Kansas, looking at the standards, building our curriculum off that. I think overall, though, it has been a good experience for me. I know what I'm going to teach. When I am teaching fourth grade math, I know place value is going to come first, and I've got to get this in, and I have about this much time. Next, I know that I have the metric system, and I have about this much time. What my problem is the last point there is that we have too much material and not enough time. So I proposed something to my curriculum director, and I said, hey, what do you think about us going to a longer school year? And then as I'm saying it, I'm like, then Kansas will come back and they'll add more material, and that's the beast that we have. How do you get all this material in 1 year? Or in my case, I have them for 2 years. So it's just some things to think about. I think overall it's good, especially was talking again with Christy Tim, my curriculum director, and she had talked about some of the different states in the past that would come to Kansas and would be way behind. And I think that's very true. And I could go into states, but I don't want to offend anybody. And now this at least brings that up to where everybody has the same expectations. So I would be on the positive side of Common Core as of this moment. So I have my paper and I have what Christy Tim's answers were to those questions, but I just wanted to go a brief overview of it here. It was a very interesting discussion. We have right now, she's been the curriculum director for 2 years, so this is only her second year. Prior to that, Rock Creek Schools has not had a curriculum director. So it's been an interesting process to listen to her, and she's applied for the principal job, but she ended up getting this director position, and she has brought cadres to our district. And before, it was more of a bring your own curriculum. Besides math, we're not vertically aligned right now. So science, social studies, ELA, it's bringing our own curriculum. I'm talking specifically about the elementary schools. So even within our own schools, we have people teaching different curriculum. And she did not use the word curriculum, she used the word resources. We're not mixing those two. Resources. So bringing all these different resources. But it was a very good conversation, very enlightening. I asked her some tough questions that she didn't want to answer towards the end, and it was more specific towards what are we going to do with the 5th through 8th grade building as we have a new one being built. You have teachers from Westmoreland, teachers from St. George. How are we going to glue them together? And she kind of steered away from that question and answering it. We're going to have to kind of muddle through this first year, and then eventually it will definitely have to come together. So I'm excited that she's on board. I'm excited that we get to bring these curriculum as we have these cadre programs for science, social studies, all the way from kindergarten up through 12, that we're going to start to get vertically aligned as a district, and that'll be some exciting stuff. So now we can go back and forth with each other, and we do currently. Me moving from St. George to Westmoreland has definitely helped that open up the conversation of what are you doing there? Okay, we're doing this. What are you doing there? Okay, we're doing this. So it's been a great conversation for both buildings with just me coming up, but on top of that, having these cadres come back and say, in science, we know about this and this and this and this and this and this. Okay, let's take a look. What's working? What's not working? Who can we contact? Who can we see? In the past, we brought a spelling program, and it was the teachers just kind of went out and researched it, and we didn't have really much guidance. This is what we think we want. We had somebody kind of pilot it for a year, talked a lot about piloting, and she talks about a lot about piloting. Right now we have 2 science programs that we are piloting at 5th and 6th grade and seeing if we like those programs, bringing them into the resources, not the curriculum, but bringing those pieces into our classrooms. And not only that, but then filtering it down also. So we are vertically aligned. We definitely need to be vertically aligned. Then we have our reference list. And it was a very interesting discussion. I was challenged. I was stretched. I went outside and looked at the Kansas State Board of Education to see what they talked about. And I noticed that Kansas has standards that are above the Common Core. Because the big question was, one of the big things I noticed is the states that are above, we're bringing ourselves down. And I thought, oh man, that can't be good. But in the end, I feel like Kansas still has the standard set. Have we adopted some of the Common Core? Yes, but we have not. We still have to go back and reference our Kansas state standards with the Common Core state standards. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. And take a look at the answers to all the questions with Christy Tim, the curriculum director.